serve you faithfully. Give us courage to face all difficulties, as the wisdom to see the ways your Spirit binds us together in mutual assistance. With confidence we make our prayer through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Amen. O Lord, our God, who are the love of justice and truth, give thy grace to our Parliament and to all who direct the affairs of our nation, and guide them by thy Holy Spirit. We beseech thee that by word and deed they may promote the well-being of our people and set forth peace among all peoples, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Together the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive them that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. And may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all now and forevermore. Amen.
The Senate is in session.
Messages from Her Excellency the President.
I received a letter from Her Excellency the President of Barbados, dated 27th of June 2025. It reads as follows. Dear sir, I wish to inform that in accordance with the advice of the Prime Minister, Ms. Roshana Benicia Trim has been appointed under Section 36(2) of the Constitution as a senator, with effect from 27th of June 2025.
Mr. President, Senator Trim is present and waits without.
Please show her into the chamber. Senator Trim, I want to welcome you to the chamber. In many ways, you're not an entire stranger to the chamber. You visited it as a youth parliamentarian, and Youth Parliament holds its debates here. The difference is that these are real debates, and your voice and vote are larger and more important. But certainly look forward to the same drive, enthusiasm that you displayed in the Youth Parliament and other youth leadership. We welcome you. We look forward to your counsel. I remember that notwithstanding you may be chronologically the most junior, there's no juniority or seniority in the chamber. And we expect, therefore, your full participation and contribution to all matters which are before us. So we warmly welcome you and congratulate you on your appointment, and I wish you a successful sojourn in Parliament. Senator Trim.
Good morning, Mr. President, members of the Honorable Chamber. I want to thank you for your welcome. Today I rise with a heart full of gratitude and humility. Having served as a National Youth Parliamentarian, as mentioned, the Chamber is I'm no stranger to the Chamber. However, of course, I recognize the work that is done here within the Senate, and so I want to thank you. And so first and foremost, I want to also, at this point, thank God for ordering my steps, and also to my family, my community, my party, and the League of Young Socialists, and to the Prime Minister and the government of Barbados. I offer my thanks for the confidence placed in me, and I hope to do the work that has been assigned and that the people of Barbados look forward to us doing as we continue to contribute to the development of Barbados and building a better life for our people. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Senator Trim. I have the relation of minutes of a meeting held on 25th June 2025 to be deferred. Senator Cummins.
Mr. President, I'd like to move that the minutes of our meeting held on Wednesday, the 25th of June 2025 be deferred at this time.
The question is that the minutes of our meeting held on June 25th, 2025 be deferred. Will those honorable senators in favor please say aye? Those against please say no. Witness the ayes have it, those minutes are deferred. Other announcements, we have indications of absence from Senator Malalou. He's doing much better, still on medical leave, and we will welcome him back in due course, but he sends his regards as he continues to complete his recovery. Her Excellence, Her Honor, Senator Thompson, Deputy President, is away on business and therefore will be absent. Apologies as well for Senator Rand Walters, who is unavoidably absent. Further welcome, it's my pleasure to welcome dear friends and guests of the Parliament of Barbados, Mr. Matthew Salik, Program Manager, and Ms. Avni Conhe, Program Officer, both senior staff members of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. They are in Barbados conducting a benchmarking exercise. The CPA has a number of benchmarks for legislatures in the Commonwealth, and these have been developed over years of discussion and expertise, and several countries have subjected their parliaments to the provincial gap analysis exercise. Benchmarks are there. You look at what the parliament has in place in actuality, and you assess where there are any gaps, you make recommendations, and the benchmarks are really designed to measure the effectiveness of the parliament, both in terms of its obvious and overt responsibilities for representation and passing laws and so on, but as an institution, how effectively the wheels and the engine runs underneath the superstructure are also assessed. So Matthew and Avni, welcome. Happy to have you in our chamber, and we look forward to the outcome of the reports. And we look forward, of course, to seeing you back in Barbados at the 68th Commonwealth Parliamentary Conference, being probably hosted by Barbados, largely at the Lloyd Erskine Sandiford Centre, but a few other venues as well. And we look forward to having you and the rest of the world here. Further announcements, additional senators who are absent, Senator Dr. Drakes and Senator Kevin Boyce. They will be unavoidably absent, and Senator Monique Tate has indicated that she will be unavoidably late. So we look forward to seeing her later in the sitting.
Presentation of petitions. Presentation of papers.
Senator Cummings.
Mr. President, I'm commanded to lay the following document: the Duties, Taxes, and Other Payments Exemption, J.P. Morgan Securities LLC and Standard Chartered Bank Order of 2025.
Reports from select committees. Questions to ministers. Request for leave to move the adjournment of the Senate on matters of urgent public importance. Statements by ministers or parliamentary secretaries. Personal explanations. Motions relating to the business or sitting of the Senate and moved by a minister. Introduction of bills.
Senator Cummings.
Mr. President, I beg to give notice of the following bills: the Tourism Levy Amendment Bill and the Copyright Bill 2025, and the following resolutions. A resolution to approve in accordance with Section 5 of the Land Acquisition Act, Cap 228, the sale to the Pilgrim Holiness Church, the Wesleyan Holiness Church, of a parcel of land, the property of the state, situate at Welch Village, Bath, in the parish of St. John in the island, and more particularly described in the schedule. The second resolution, Mr. President, is to approve in accordance with Section 5 of the Crown Lands Vesting and Disposal Act, Cap 225, the lease to the Pilgrim Holiness Church, the Wesleyan Holiness Church, of a parcel of land, the property of the state, situate at Bath in the parish of St. John in this island, and more particularly described in the first schedule on the terms and conditions set out in the second schedule for the purpose to operate and undertake its church services. I beg also to move the first reading of the Tourism Levy Amendment Bill 2025 and the first reading of the Copyright Bill 2025.
The question is that those bills be read a first time. Will the honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. You think the ayes have it? Those bills are accordingly read a first time.
Public business, sir.
Public business is now the order of the day.
Order number 8, sir. This is in the name of the Honorable Leader of the Senate. That is signed to the Honorable Minister for Technology and Information.
Mr. President.
It's the resolution. Read. In accordance with the provisions of the Special Loans Act, Chapter 105, the borrowing by the government of Barbados of the sum of approximately Barbados $117 million from the Small Fund for Development on the terms and conditions contained in the loan agreement, the main provisions of which are set out in the schedule, and the proceeds of which will be used to finance the polyclinic upgrade and refurbishment of primary health care systems project phase 1.
Mr. President, I beg that the orders 8 and 9 be treated as a cognate debate.
The question is that orders number 8 and 9 be treated as a cognate debate. Just to be clear, they both relate to loans under the Special Loans Act, Cap 105. They both relate to loans from the Saudi Fund for Development, just different projects. And to be clear, the presentation will therefore need to focus on the policy issues of both items 8 and 9. We will vote, of course, on those items individually, starting with item number 8, and then we will take the vote. So the cognate debate is on the second reading. All of the aspects of the bill are dealt with, of the resolutions will be dealt with individually. And that is just a reminder for everyone, but especially for Senator Trim on her first day on the job. So the question is that orders number 8 and 9 be treated as a cognate debate. Will those honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. Senator Reid, please proceed, and we will treat for the second reading items 8 and 9 as a cognate debate. Please ensure that policy issues of both are covered in your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. President, and will do. Mr. President, it is with great happiness that I get to present first with the arrival of the new Senator Trim to this honorable chamber. And no, I'm not a newbie anymore, but because she's a newbie, I can rib her a little bit with a story that she and I share. So in maybe late 2017, early 2018, when the then opposition leader, now Prime Minister, asked me to do some work on behalf of the Barbados Labour Party, she called me at some point in time and indicated, did I read the newspaper today regarding this young member of the junior parliament who resigned? I said, no, I didn't see the story. She said, well, I think she has lots of potential. I'd like her to be involved with the work that you're doing for me. So I said to her then, I said, well, PM, if she resigned, I don't know if his resignation is work. I don't know if that considers work. She said, no, she's talented, you should talk to her, etc., etc. So she came to my office. I hadn't met her before. And she wasn't sure what she was going to get. So at the time, I was managing a design firm that my business partner and I ran, and she was enthralled by the art on the walls and the graphic designers and the work we were doing. So she kept coming back. And I started trying to understand, what were her skill sets, what was her capacity, what was she really driven by. And very, very early on the piece, I understood her fire for social justice, her fire for advocacy, her prolific nature on social media platforms, and just her overall ambition to be someone who contributes to the development of the country. Not a country she was born in, but like me, a country that she fell in love with and adopted by, and wanted to do everything in her power to be able to aid in its development and transform it forward. And so over the years, we've worked on many projects together that range from things like we gathering in the first iteration to, during COVID, helping out people with the household mitigation fund. Lots of projects that ultimately are for the benefit and driving the country forward. And it's made me so pleased to hear the words that she used this morning. And she talked about doing the work. And that was really my message to her always, right? I said to her, at the end of the day, the work is the work. There's no getting away from the work. Like you could make up things as you go along, but you can never make up the work, right? The work is the foundation for every single component of the contribution that we can make. So you can shirk things, you can pretend, you can do all types of other things, but at the end of the day, your work is going to speak for itself. So I really do want to salute you that you've started a journey, a new part of your journey, a continuation of what you started before. And just like you did before, the work is going to speak for itself. So I wish you well. And on that theme, Mr. President, about the work, I really want to support this resolution. But more than a resolution, quite frankly, I want to support and really praise the people that don't tend to get praise in this type of work. It's your leaders, it's your workers, it's your economists, it's your analysts, it's your accountants, it's the people who actually drive this work forward to raise the capital to be able to do things that develop this country. And we put them in a strange position, quite frankly. They do a lot of heavy lifting. They do a lot of development of strategies and proposals. They do a lot of pitches globally. They do all these things. And they come back and the work they've done goes in the public space and is either not understood fully or in some instances criticized. And I feel like this resolution is an example of just the incredible work they do and the good that could come out of the work they do. And I don't want this to be, I'm not going to call every single name because the list is too many, but it's important, I think, for the record, for some names to be said, because these people have been doing this work since 2018, and some obviously before. So for Dr. Greenidge of the Central Bank, the DFE, Ian Carrington, the multiple ministers of economic affairs that we've had, who've done incredible work, from Marsha Cattle to Chad Blackman to Minister McConney, to our revenue commissioners, to our heads of customs, to our consultants, to the head of Treasury, Ms. Blunt, to our permanent secretaries within finance and economic affairs, like Nancy Headley, to the advisors that we've had that have done incredible work, Dr. Professor Prasad, Pascal Saint-Hemy, Right Honorable Dr. Miller, people who have done incredible work advising, helping, building the ability for us to enjoy the quality of life that we have had in very, very difficult times. And I think we end up having conversation around financial and economic matters, and we try to simplify it. We try to make it simple, and we compare managing a government, managing an economy to the equivalent of managing a household, but it really is not the same thing. There's a complexity to it where you are managing the economy is you're sailing a ship in the middle of multiple storms coming at you multiple directions. You're building new decks while sailing the ship, and you have to keep the people downstairs comfortable and sleeping well and rested. That's the complexity of it, and you have all these things coming at you that are difficult and hard. And I don't think that we fully grasp the complexity around it, and we make it easy to sometimes just have song bites of reactions towards things. And I think it's important that while we don't dwell in the past, that is, you have to understand where you were and where you are now and what are you able to do going forward. And we, this government, inherited a country that was at absolute crisis proportions in 2018. That at some point in time in preparing for this, I thought to myself, imagine if we went into COVID crisis, 7 weeks cover of foreign reserves, junk rating bonds, with a team of leaders who were unable to manage the fundamentals of our economy. How are we going to survive times like that? And these are not just accusations, not just political banter, it's the facts. That you have inherited a situation that you had to dig so deep to get out of, and the only way to do so is with discipline, with focus, with effort, with the work. You inherited a crisis, and in 7 short years, you've converted that to global confidence in your capacity to drive a country forward. And these are facts. You moved from a series where it was commonplace for us to talk about downgrades after downgrades after downgrades, and now it's commonplace for us to talk about upgrades to upgrades to upgrades. We've completely switched the narrative. And it's not a flick of the fingers. It's not any magic. It's the work. It's the effort. It's the skill. It's the dedication of people putting in hard hours to do well by the country. And these are facts. These are not made-up things. When I was previously advisor to the Prime Minister, and then when I was appointed to Chief of Staff, the very first meeting, and I'd been in many, obviously, I don't know, probably hundreds of meetings by then, but my first meeting as Chief of Staff, when Prime Minister Swan was with the Ministry of Finance, I didn't forget it. We got there 10 o'clock. She was early, she got there 15 minutes before, 9:45, and we went probably straight to 6 o'clock. Not a break, no lunch, there's no stopping. She went for 8 hours straight, every single nook and cranny in the Ministry of Finance. I'd never seen anything like it. So I went into that meeting always feeling her capacity to connect, to speak, to drive things forward were superpowers. And in that moment, I understood the real superpower of running a country properly is understanding the economic machinery of a country, understanding the finances, understanding every single capacity to drive or break things. And if you didn't understand that, then fundamentally, you didn't understand how to run a country. And I think that's a significant gap, quite frankly, between the opposition as is now and the BLP in government. A fundamental capacity to manage the economy. And you could get fancy, you could use all kinds of terms, you could use all types of phrasings that are technical and go over people's head, but it's just the fundamentals. And if you do not run the economy well, then you have nothing. You find yourself in a situation where you are not able to deliver on the promises and the intent that you may have because you simply don't have the capacity to do so. And that is really the construct of the difference between the two entities. And I think it's important for us to understand that, and I'm sorry that Senator Walters is not here because I don't want to go after anyone when they're not in the chamber, but I'll speak to it a little bit. I think there's a fundamental difference in understanding the construct between borrowing good debt and bad debt. And I think it's, I don't know, sometimes a little bit complex because people hear debt and they get a little bit nervous. And so I really wanted to spend a little bit of time, Mr. President, if you indulge me, to just walk through that very, very simple terms. And they're not the same thing. They're fundamentally not. The government on a day-to-day basis collects revenues in all forms, right? Taxes, duties, fees. It collects a bunch of revenues. There are different periods of the time of the year where the government has spikes in the amount of revenue it collects. Senator Monroe night, around crop over time, lots of people coming in, the government is going to collect some money. Tax season, bumper period during the winter season, for global travel, there'll be bumper periods. But for the most part, there's a steady flow of revenue coming in during the course of the year. There's no difference to a business, any business. However, the government has a program that it set out itself to do. And there are major instances of development of new things that it must do. That one, it may not have the lump sum of money at any point in time to do so. Two, it may be critically important to do, however, it doesn't have the ability to do so within the strict values of the revenue it has to be able to do so. So it makes the decisions like all businesses do. It uses credit. Now, in using that credit, there are different forms of credit. Just like in life, you can use a credit that is wasteful and do things that you may enjoy in the short term in the moment, or you can do things that are fundamentally beneficial to your growth. Think about it this way, like credit and the idea of debt is no different for government or business the way that food is for the human body. You can eat good food that enhances your longevity, or you can eat bad food that can be enjoyable in the moment, but it's not so good for you in the long run. It's fundamental. And I think in this example of this resolution with these orders 8 and number 9 could not be a better definition of good credit, of good debt. That you have, in fact, built a program to do things that are not going to be beneficial for 2 days, 5 years, 10 years. This is 50-year level projects. The development of polyclinics, the development of urban housing that people then are able to get high quality services provided to them, whether it's energy, whether it's water, whether it's sewage. These are things that are going to transform the path that this country is going towards. In every single definition of what good debt or good credit may be, this is an example of it. So there is a difficulty understanding sometimes because of the scale and the size of things in terms of the tickets at large. People here combined total of 180 million Barbados dollars and they get a little bit nervous. I understand that. These are big numbers. There's no doubt about it. But fundamentally, this is what it costs to take care of the lives of thousands of people. That's the cost it costs to run Barbados. The cost to run Barbados on an annualized basis, as is the $5 billion. That's the number, right? That's a fundamental thing that I think we have to understand. And in this chamber and in the other place, when we argue or debate about these things, we have to start with the basis, that's what it costs to run a good version of Barbados. Not a perfect Barbados, not an imaginary Barbados, but a good Barbados that has its problems and has its advantages. And fundamentally, that's what we're in the business of doing. Now, we're ambitious, so we want to do more things. We want to solve more problems. We want to have more development. I've taken charge of a ministry, and today is 154 days that I have this job. And I've been speaking quite a lot to my colleagues, to the Prime Minister, about how I see an opportunity with these two main pillars that are under my responsibility now, of industry and digital development, that these can be rocket ships to the prosperity in the next 50 years of this country. And not taking, I think all my colleagues probably think their ministries as that, but I really feel that about mine, quite frankly. And we've made a couple of decisions in policy over the last few decades that I think the country doesn't feel the benefit of evolution of technology. One of those areas is a decision around what is called deindustrialization. Anytime your economy has a percentage of less than 20% of its revenue earned by industry, once it dips under that, you call it deindustrialization. We dipped under that in the 1980s with the leaving of Intel and all of those high-value manufacturers. We didn't go to the next stage of industrial development, and as a result, we see some of the results that we have now. Not only are you just a consumer of other people's ideas, people don't consume your own ideas. You don't have the benefit of the resilience and the diversification where you only have to be important things that you want to consume, and you're not making things for others to consume. And the advent of technology allows us, and there's reasons for it, there are a bunch of arguments around why it was done, but we're in a sweet spot of a moment where the advent of technology means that we have the access to AI and robotics and all types of things that gives us an equal advantage that we didn't have in the development of global products and services. We must take advantage of it now. The other area of obvious concern and need for investment is really around digital development, and we feel it everywhere. One of the statistics that I hope to be able to put to end very shortly, quite frankly, is all of us here, most of us here drove here. Every year, half of the persons who have driver's license in this country choose to renew their licenses. So 75,000 people renew their license every single year. As of now, as you know, it's a manualized process, right? Why is that? Because you need to prove you are you. So how do you prove that you are you? Identification. How do you prove that you are you via identification and remote access? You do so through digital identification. So you have a series of investments and development frameworks you have to create to be able to allow people to do the things they want to do in services in life, such as instantly get a notification on their phone, press a button, yes, opt in, get whatever fee debited from their account, and have their license renewed. You have that in a bunch of countries all over the world. That's the country, that's what we want here. Now, to get that, you need investment, you need skills, you need infrastructure, you need modernity, you need change. And to do such things without understanding that you want to have to be in the business of, where necessary, borrowing and gaining credit for long-term developmental tools. And every single time that we have an opportunity to do such, we push ourselves in a state of uproar because we don't understand the difference between bad debt and good debt means that we're never going to progress. So in very, very simple terms, I think it's fundamental, especially in this chamber, that we start having a conversation that differentiates the two. And we could have our own opinions. It's the business of politics is to argue. By the very nature of our opposition, they must oppose. That is the nature of what they do. But there needs to be a distinction between opposing for the sake of opposing and opposing for the sake of constructive, fundamentally driving the country forward in an impactful way. And I'm hopeful that's what we can do on this conversation. Fundamentally, the type of work that this bill represents, this resolution represents, is what the work I think the country can be proud of. I told my ministry on Monday a story, and I'm not proud of it. And it's not the Barbados that I want to live in, but it's the Barbados that exists. I was dropping my youngest daughter to nursery, and I'm driving. I'm speaking to my older daughter who's in the front seat. My younger daughter's in the back seat. I looked to my left. I wouldn't say where it was, but I looked to my left, and I saw a middle-aged lady next to the standpipe, 3 young kids, leaving them naked as they're born in a standpipe, bag next to her, clearly with their clothes and their toiletries inside of it. And my daughter sees it, who's 14, and she says, wow. I say, yeah, that's why I go to work every day. That's the work, right? That's where you drive things forward, that there's a level of work that we have to do, especially in urban spaces, and especially people whose voices we don't connect with, we don't hear, that this is the work, this is how we drive things forward to make sure those lives are better. And then on top of that, you build on top of that to make the next generation of lives better. And so I don't know, quite frankly, that there could be much argument around the necessity of these 2 loans. We all know in great detail the fundamental problems that we've been having around the advancement of our health sector. We all know that the level of technology, the level of skills that we have to input to fight things like non-communicable diseases, to fight the ability to be able to have people have wholesome, productive lives, to get the services in the level that they wanted to have, with the level of technology that's available elsewhere that we want to have here. We all know the importance of those things. We all know it's going to cost money to do those things. We all know that we're not blessed to have diamonds and oil and large populations. We all know the constraints that Barbados has. And so what you have is a balancing of prudent decision-making, disciplined management, visionary ambition, with the ability to go to marketplaces and say, hey, because of the work we've done, you can trust Barbados to return your investment over a period of time, and we'll be a good partner in your long run. And that's honorable work. So I want to be very, very clear in my support of the work that the men and women who lead our economic affairs and led our finances have done. I believe them to be world-class. Absolutely world-class. And the ability for them to leave roles here in Barbados and go and head organizations and head really stellar entities is testimony to that. And so I think we need to be careful. Yes, critique, yes, hold people strongly, yes, voice our concerns, yes, voice our disagreements, we must do that, it's a democratic process. But I think we have to be careful when we go after things that took hard work, hard effort. These are not things that happen overnight. These are things that are manifest as a result of sometimes years of effort, of negotiations, of working out terms, of getting the best deal on behalf of Barbados. That when we just come into public space and don't fully understand all the constructs and all the benefits, and we poo-poo things, that we put ourselves in a position where we're not advancing our country, but harming our country. I'm mindful that is the crop over season, Mr. President, and some of the colleagues have indicated that we shouldn't dwell too long. But this is important work. This is necessary work. And thus, Mr. President, I beg that this resolution now be passed.
Thank you, Senator Worrell.
Thank you, Mr. President. And in making my contribution today, I would like to join, as is the custom, and welcome the new Senator Trim to the Senate chamber. And I know that she has performed here because I would have watched her, I think as far back as 2014 or 2016 even, in youth parliament in this very same chamber. I think at that time she was the leader of opposition business, or the opposition leader at that time. So she is a competent debater, and I wish her well in her sojourn here in the Senate chamber, and recognizing that she has a wider audience and a wider platform, and I do wish her well in her contributions in this chamber. Mr. President, with regard to the matter before us today, the cognate debates for the special loans from the Saudi Development Fund, one for 117 million Barbados dollars, the purpose of which would be to finance the polyclinic upgrade and refurbished primary healthcare system. And then the second loan for, I believe that would be 68.4 million, again from the same Saudi Development Fund for urban renewal projects in water, housing, and infrastructure sector. Now, Mr. President, generally when it comes to loans in Barbados, especially to upgrade the healthcare system and also to offer housing and infrastructure upgrades, you generally would not have any difficulty with these loans, because we know that the healthcare system in Barbados is in a deplorable state, and you have constant complaints from persons, especially you hear a lot in the complaints at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, but then there's also a need for upgrades within the polyclinic sector as well. I will come to those issues a little bit later on. But I think it's important, and when we are discussing these loans, that we look in the context in which the money is being borrowed, the source of the funds, and you could ask yourself a question, could it have been done in another way? I do believe that the terms for the loans none of which the spokesperson for government cared to take us through those details. So really and truly has not really convinced me on this side in terms of whether or not I should be supporting this bill. But in terms of the loan, on paper, it looks good. 3.5% on a semi-annual basis for 20 years with a grace period of 5 years. A foreign loan. I guess that some would say, compared to the last loan which we debated in this chamber, that 3.5% is way better than 8.5%. So on that basis, one would say, well, yes, this may very well be a good loan that the government can buy into and that the country should be able to support. But we also need to take into consideration, when we are looking at these loans, the economic situation that the country is faced with. And what has been the current complaint of many Barbadians over the last few years is that we seem to be borrowing too much money. And it does not seem as though we are earning sufficient money to pay back these loans. And I am not just speaking, well, I am basically saying what the man on the street is thinking, that every single time we've come to this chamber so many times, every time that the Prime Minister leaves this country, she returns with news of another loan. Then we also had the IMF, the funds from the IMF, which we would have paid back some of those funds in the 8.5% loan, again paying back loans at an interest rate of under 3% with a loan at an interest rate of above 8.5%. So we have to wonder what is really going on in terms of the economics and the accounting practices which this Barbados-led government is engaging in, because they don't always seem to make sense. And when you look at the recent central bank reports, some of the information in that report also, it speaks to what Barbadians are concerned about, that we are borrowing too much money. And it does not seem as though we have the capacity to repay that money. Even though they always speak about the debt to GDP. They always speak about the debt to GDP. Yes, it has come down, but that is not the only metric by which you determine whether or not you are in a capacity to borrow more money and whether or not you are actually servicing those loans to a credible amount. So I want to focus on some of those things as I look at these two loan agreements today. One, it increases the external borrowing, which has been a concern for many Barbadians. Yes, this government boasts of having over 32 weeks cover in terms of foreign exchange cover. So we want to, with a government that has over 32 weeks foreign exchange cover, but did you not have the capacity then to, instead of borrowing this money on the external market and again increasing the external debt, why not look at the possibility of raising the money to do the same projects on the local market? Because at some point, we have to be, when we borrow, every loan that we borrow on the external market, we have to be in a capacity when that loan becomes due to pay in foreign exchange. And if you're not earning enough foreign exchange to pay your loans, you will eventually run into trouble. And even though you may have 32 weeks of import cover at this time, the changing dynamics of the world economy, and I heard it said by members on the other side in justification as to why they will justifications for their borrowing, that you have to give the country wiggle room. But the changing dynamics in the global economy, especially after we did our estimates debate, or during the period of time that we did our estimates debate in this chamber, in the US, there was talk about the tariffs. And that unsteady situation which still exists in this world as to what the tariffs will be has put the markets and the global economy on a very, precarious trajectory. Some days they're up, other days they're down, and people are not spending as freely as they did before. And the Barbados economy is one which depends, or at least used to depend, on tourism as our major foreign exchange earner. And if our external markets, if our UK market, they're watching how they're spending because they don't know how the tariff situation would impact on their disposable income and the income that they will have to travel. Same thing within the US economy, same thing within the European markets. A lot of in Canada, a lot of the areas that we look on to depend on our tourists, we have to take some precautions here when we are preparing our financials to make provision that every single year we may not have a rosy and a buoyant tourism sector performing. And we have to make provisions for that year where the inflow from tourism does not necessarily meet the capacity for us to earn sufficient, to earn enough on our foreign exchange that we can repair these loans. We also have to develop the resiliency within the country as well, that we shore up sectors such as manufacturing and such as agriculture, so that we can earn more by exporting. But when it comes to Barbados over the last 7 years under a Barbados Labour Party-led government, many Barbadians have recognized that the only thing that we seem to do successfully is borrow money on the international market. Every time the Prime Minister travels, borrows money on the international market, and it seems that this government believes that they will be in a position to repay loans by doing additional foreign borrowing. And that, Mr. President, I would like to say to the government, is not sustainable and is not the way in which it should be managing the economy. It has not shown, this Barbados Labour Party government has not shown to the people of Barbados that they have the appetite to develop the industries within Barbados. If you look at the same central bank report, you will see a decline in the output from agriculture. If you look at the same central bank report, you will see a decline in the output from tourism. If you look at the same central bank report, you will see a decline in the output for manufacturing and even for the construction industry, which they want to give us the impression in Barbados is booming. So the point that I am making, Mr. President, is that all of our sectors with foreign exchange earning capacity under this Barbados Labour Party government has been in decline. And the only foreign exchange earning capacity in this country which has shown an upward increase is the ability of this government to go out there and borrow money. And many Barbadians are wondering what is happening with the money being borrowed. They cannot see the level of work in this country and the level of development in this country to equate to the level of foreign borrowing. So I want to suggest to the Barbados Labour Party government that they had an option here, because we need to look at our debt repayment schedule. It is fine and dandy that if someone out there offers you a 3.5% loan, that you grab that up, compared to the 8.5% that you're paying on the capital market. Yes, you will grab that up, but you need to consider what is the debt repayment profile of this country down the road. None of this information the spokesperson for the government offered in terms of promoting or even defending this loan. Give you no idea of how it would affect the debt profile of the country and the debt repayment profile. We have a 20-year loan, 5 years grace period. We don't know if in the 5-year grace period it includes both principal and interest. None of these things were mentioned or told to the people of Barbados. If the 5-year grace period includes both principal and interest payments, and then you have the loan being repaid in the 15 years. So for this loan of the one loan of $117 million, you could very well be paying out as much as $54 million in terms of interest payments for this particular loan. Done within a year or two within the current account and the capital works scheme of the project, a year or two in terms of doing the refurbishments in the healthcare and also the rehabilitation work to the infrastructure, the water and the roads as well. Probably a year or two. So you don't necessarily need to run to the foreign exchange market to make up for that foreign exchange which will be utilized in these loans. So that was also an option which was available to the government. But I wonder why they did not do it. Is it because after taking the haircut and defaulting on the debt repayments on the local market, that the appetite has not yet returned in the local market for government paper? They may get up and say, well, yes, we put up government paper and it's being taken up because obviously, there are certain businesses in this country, the banks, the insurance companies, the credit unions, they do have to invest a portion of their earnings in government paper. But we want to know what is the appetite by the average Barbadian who, before 2018, when the government defaulted and caused persons to take a haircut in bonds, savings bonds, and all of the government paper, you had a large catchment of Barbadians who would look to opportunities to invest in savings bonds and other government paper in order to augment their pension at retirement or as a way of getting additional interest above and beyond the interest which was normally paid at the bank, because in some instances you don't get any interest at the bank. You also have to ask the question too, how much interest is the government earning from keeping such high debt foreign exchange cover? The interest that the government is earning on the foreign exchange compared to utilizing a local loan and utilizing some of that foreign exchange for the time being. These are things that could have been done, but it seems sometimes that this government only knows one play, and that play is to borrow our way. Borrow money is almost like the song that you had years ago, and this is the crop over season in which that is done. Bring drink, somebody will pay. Because this government seems to have the mentality, borrow the money, somebody else will have to pay, and not make any necessary provision as to how that money will be repaid. Now, Mr. President, they may give you the impression that I am just making up all of this information, but I want to come with facts from the central bank reports, especially one which was recently issued, which shows that as much as the Barbados Labour Party government and persons such as Senator Reid would try to give the impression that this economy is booming and all is well in this country, it is not so. In fact, one would ask the question, for 154 days in the ministry, what really has Senator Reid accomplished other than being able to come and tell us today that we should be able to have our driver's license renewed automatically? Right now, that is something that should have been done ever since. This government had a Ministry of Innovation, and every single project under the Ministry of Innovation since 2018 has failed. And I will just repeat them because all of them resulted in monies which were borrowed and money which was wasted. Because you had to borrow money or find money. Let's go to licensing authority. You had the stickers for the driver's license. You had that started in 2018. This is something that I agreed with. I actually liked it because you could see by the color of the sticker whether or not, even if you were not collecting road tax any longer, but if the insurance on the vehicle was up to date. That was a project started under this government, came to an end, no explanation as to why it ended. Then they had persons go and put the tags on the vehicles. We don't know to this day if those tags are working. And again, a project which was funded by this government, possibly by borrowed money, abandoned, and we don't know how much was spent, and we don't know the reasons why it was spent. So I'm just showing to Senator Reid, these are some of the things that in his ministry that he has the capacity to rectify and to bring reports to the people of Barbados so that we can have a better understanding, other than the fact that you recognize after 154 days that it should be easier for Barbadians to renew their driver's license. We want more than that from a government which claims to be so competent and so A-class and on top of their game and everything, that to come here after 154 days to say to Barbadians, yes, you should be able to easier renew your driver's license. We've been saying that for the longest while, and your Ministry of Innovation had promised that since 7 years ago, but yet still it is not happening. And I'm not done with the litany of projects. There's the Trident ID card under the same ministry as well, started and abandoned. At one time, they forced all Barbadians to get it, saying it was mandatory. Then the minister was changed because he was doing nonsense. I guess that they changed him. I don't know, Mr. President. That's a possibility. The ministry was changed, and then you heard from a more competent minister, okay, you can use both. You can use the Trident ID card, and you can use the regular blue ID card. Again, money which was wasted, again, Mr. President, money which was wasted in terms of the whole project of the Trident ID cards, wasting time of Barbadians who had to line up outside of the different agency, wasting their lunch hour, wasting their business day in order to get the cards, and then to tell Barbadians, well, you no longer need to rush to get the card. The regular blue ID card would work just the same. So all of these are projects which this government started and then abandoned. And Barbadians might think that there's no cost associated to this, but we really need to inquire who is the middleman, the consultant, who was paid to develop the project, the middleman who provide the resources, possibly the ID card, the printing machine, the persons who benefited also from the additional largesse coming out from the government. All of these are things that we have to consider. And for that reason, that is why Barbadians are concerned that the money being borrowed by this government is not being spent in the best interest of the people of Barbados. That is the overall concern. We could even come to part of it deal with road infrastructure. You have roads that are milled and paved, and when the rain starts to fall, potholes back in them again. What is the purpose of that? You mill and pave a road overnight, left it flat, for the rainwater to settle on the roads. Then when you have a heavy downpour of rain, in less than 2 months, some of those same mill and paved roads are in potholes again and will again need to be resurfaced. You have a situation where some roads which were mill and paved when they first came in 2018 receive a job again in less than 7 years. So we are only building roads that can last for 3 to 5 years, or not, well, in this situation, not even a year, because in less than a year, it needs repaving. Good example, take a look at the road at Highway from the Warrens roundabout by the Sol gas station going up the hill towards University. That was one of the first projects being done by this government. And when you come down that hill, there is a crater that if you are not careful, it will take you to China. On that very said road, Mr. President. That is a road which was done by this government in less than 7 years, and it has proven not to be lasting. So is the money being spent adequately to finance developmental projects for this country? And again, when we look at developmental projects, Mr. President, none developmental projects. Part of this loan deals with housing. Right now, the housing situation in Barbados is in a crisis. You have persons being faced with the ridiculous prospect of paying over $250 to rent a room in a shared house where they share toilet and bath facilities and kitchen and all other things with other persons. $250. At one point, that was $100 a week. Or $150. No, in some cases it's $250, almost $300 a week. That shows that the housing market in this country is in crisis. Has this government, I will just ask to be kind, because I already know the answer, has this government invested in any significant rental housing projects in this country that would be of some assistance to some of those people, and especially mainly young people or mainly single parents, mothers who are trying to look for somewhere to raise their children? This government has not invested significantly in any major housing project in this country that could bring a dent to such a reckless situation where Barbadians are forced to pay over $300 a week just to rent a room in a house, sharing a toilet and a bath and kitchen facilities with someone. And this government wants to get on a platform and give people the impression that they're doing an excellent job. You have not been doing an excellent job. That is why Barbadians are concerned about where all the money that is being borrowed is going. If they could see the performance, they would not be concerned. Because if you can see where the money is going, you would not be concerned about the level of borrowing. But we are at this stage where we are not saying where the money is going, but every time the Prime Minister leaves the country, she comes back with another loan. And we are, I know I will say it many times because it's important. It's important and a salient fact, Mr. President. This senator here may not be engaging with the people of Barbados, but I do. And when I speak to the constituents in St. Michael Central, these are the things that I hear. When our Democratic Labour Party, when we go out and we speak to people, these are the concerns that we are hearing. They're concerned that money is being borrowed, they're not seeing how it is being spent, and they're not certain that we will have the capacity to repay it when the lenders come a-calling. And they're also concerned that it could impact on our dollar facing the consequence of being devalued. We really don't want to spend a very prolonged period of time in an IMF program as Jamaica did. We would like to get out of the IMF hand and move on with programs to develop this country. All of these are things that we are concerned about, sir. Now, I mentioned the central bank report. To show that we are not able to repay our loans, Mr. President, there are some metrics within that central bank report which I find to be quite alarming.
So which report are you referring to?
the review of the Barbados economic performance, January to June 2025.
Thank you very
The
much.
most recent central bank report, I think it was only delivered last Friday, so if the honorable senators on the other side did not have a chance to read it, I can make, well, the copy is available for them that they can download, Mr. President. But in looking at that report, Mr. President, it shows that the external debt service to current account credit has increased. And that, Mr. President, is something that you don't just look at debt to GDP, but the external debt to service to current account has increased from 3.5 in 2019. We are now at 9.6 in 2024. And for June 2024, it was 9.1, but astonishingly for June 2025, 34.9, which possibly deals with the loan, which the debt which was recently acquired of the 8.5%, and some of that being used to repay the IMF debt. But those figures are alarming, Mr. President, because it shows that the country is not earning sufficient from current revenue to pay for its external debt. That is one of the significant things in the increase in that ratio, Mr. President. And then there are other factors which we need to look at. Don't just look at the debt to GDP, because we know how the debt to GDP has fallen significantly. But you need to look at our interest payments. Now, the interest payments has increased from 249.7 million in 2019 to a whopping 749.9 million in 2024, based on from this report. That is a significant increase in interest payments, Mr. President. And if you're paying that much in interest, it means that you have very little left to do capital works projects, and you have very little left for other goods and services, because you've increased from 249.7 million in 2019, and now we are at 749.9 million in 2024. And based on the projection, it will be could very well be 800 million or more at the end of this financial year for 2025, Mr. President. Those are things which you need to look at. And then when you look at the performance of the economy, Mr. President, I mentioned we are concerned that we are not earning enough to pay for these loans. When you look at the sectors, our revenue earning sectors have declined overall since 2019. They have, in some cases, they're now struggling to reach the 2019 targets, and in other cases, they have dropped significantly below the 2019 targets. Look at tourism, Mr. President. The GDP by sector and activity, tourism in 2019 was 736.2 million. In 2024, Mr. President, at the time when, in 2024, Mr. President, at the time when the world had already recovered from COVID, Barbados was still lagging behind at 703.9 million, Mr. President. We should be able to do better than that. So this is one indicator that shows that this country is not earning enough foreign exchange to pay back for these foreign loans, which the Prime Minister brings back to the country whenever she leaves. I've said it for a fourth time, Senator Nichols, so you don't need to, through you, Mr. President, just letting Senator Nichols know that I've said it for a fourth time. So, and then when we look at other productive sectors, Mr. President, such as agriculture, in 2019, Mr. President, we earned 264.9 million from the agricultural sector. In 2024, a measly 196.6 million from the agricultural sector. So this government, for all the time that they have been in office, have abandoned agriculture in this country. And that is why, and we are feeling it in terms of the impact on the cost of living and in this country. That's why you have, in Barbados, you pay over $8 sometimes a pound for yam, over $4 a pound for sweet potatoes in some instances. You have a crisis now in the poultry sector. You also have a crisis in the crisis in poultry and crisis with the pork industry, because at one point in time we were resilient in terms of our production of pork in Barbados, at least, but now you have a situation where this government has opened up the floodgates and allowed persons to import pork, and the pork is being sold almost at the same price and basically cutting out local farmers. That does not show that this government has any intention of doing anything for agriculture in this country. And all of these are things that need to be shored up if the country is to be in a situation where it can pay back for these loans. We must increase the performance and the level of activity in our productive sectors. We must help our small business people. We must help our farmers. Do not just put all of the assistance into the hands of the big business and tourism. A lot of assistance have gone the way of tourism, but we are seeing diminishing returns from the tourism sector because it has not yet caught up in terms of its contribution prior to 2019. Manufacturing, Mr. President, is also another weak area. In 2019, the contribution was $627.7 million, and in 2024, a little boost of $651.6 million. But again, Mr. President, more can be done to shore up manufacturing. So yes, there's been a little boost, mostly coming from possibly the rum industry, but more can be done. And then this fallacy that there's a building boom in this country. Yes, there's a building boom. We see places being constructed, but then when we look at who's actually employed in the construction, many of them are not Barbadians. Quite frankly, you have to get an interpreter when you go on the sites. So that impacts the labor market in this country. Many of them are not Barbadian, and a lot of that money will not be staying into the Barbados and going into the communities to help to finance households. But you have a mining and quarrying industry which is down in comparison to what it was in 2019. But you have other sectors which have been increasing. So overall, Mr. President, if you look at don't just listen to the sweet talk coming from the government, but you need to dissect and analyze the figures. And you will find that they will give you the impression with the sweet talk that everything is fine and dandy and rosy in this country. But when you look at the figures say a completely different story. When you go on the ground in this country, Barbadians feel a completely different story and a completely different impact in terms of their wallet and in terms of their quality of life and in terms of the disposable income which they have. You can imagine that a government who is buoyant and boasting could only take a cent off of gas, and Barbados is paying the highest for gasoline all over the world compared to other countries. All of these impact on the productivity of the country and the competitiveness of the country. Maybe the government might need to consider removing some of the taxes off of the tourism industry, and perhaps that would make it more competitive, because you're hearing the tourists saying constantly, Barbados is becoming far too expensive for them to travel to. And everywhere, people are looking for a bargain. And perhaps that is one of the reasons why this economy has not rebounded in the way how it should, because the government is taxing its way out of this recession and taxing Barbadians at every turn. You have a high cost of living, and it impacts even on the cultural sector in this country. You have a dismal performing crop over season, Mr. President. So we could possibly stay here till 9, 10 o'clock tonight, and it would not make a difference to the crop over season, because it is not that impactful because people have no money to spend. And they're not really engaging in the activities in that way, Mr. President. And there's also the crime situation as well, which have persons staying at home.
Honorable members, there's too much buzz, please. Press on Senator Walker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now, in terms of what these funds will be utilized for, I am hoping that after borrowing this money, that we will see a significant improvement in the quality of health care delivery, especially at our polyclinics. Now, I know that this government has pushed that trying to get persons to utilize the polyclinics as opposed to going to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, accident and emergency. Now, it's okay to tell them to do this, but when they go to the polyclinic setting, you must have the diagnostic tools available that they can get a similar service. So don't rush them to the polyclinic and they need an x-ray, and the polyclinics tell them, well, you have to go back to QEH. Don't rush them to the polyclinics and they need a simple thing as an ultrasound, and that capacity is not available at the polyclinic. So I'm hoping that all of these things will be included to outfit all of our polyclinics, or as many of the polyclinics in the large catchment area, in particular the Morris Bayer Polyclinic, the St. John Polyclinic, which should be used for what it was actually built for, and the St. Vincent's Court Polyclinic, and Brantford Tate Polyclinic as well, so that yes, when you are sending persons away from accident and emergency, that they can receive the appropriate diagnostic care which is necessary at the polyclinics, that the polyclinics will not have to refer them back to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. So I'm hoping that out of these funds that you will see the diagnostic equipment such as x-rays where necessary, and also ultrasounds, the ability to do some blood tests in the polyclinic setting, so that when the doctor sees a patient, that they will be able to get a full profile of that individual and treat and discharge that patient from out of the polyclinic setting, that they will not have to become a burden on the Queen Elizabeth Hospital accident and emergency. You also need to increase the capacity within these clinics as well. Oftentimes, most days, there's only one doctor working in the clinic who has to see regular appointments and walk-ins. So you need to increase the capacity, the number of physicians who work within the polyclinic setting, that you will have a shorter wait time, and that even if persons walk in, that they will be seen faster. And doctors also need to have the capacity to spend a little bit more time in terms of with the patients to actually get a better idea of their profile. So you need to reduce the burden on those employees, doctors and nurses within the polyclinic setting. So I'm hoping that these funds would help to alleviate some of those bottleneck challenges within the sector. There are other areas too, Mr. President, which I could mention, but I would want to speak to the infrastructure projects. We need to have serious housing projects, especially within the urban corridor of Barbados. We need to have projects which will bring back persons and business to Bridgetown, because Bridgetown has become a ghost city, especially not just at night, but some days you travel through Bridgetown is almost like a sleeping city. So that could only be rectified if you bring adequate housing projects within the Bridgetown environment as well. These are things which need to be done, Mr. President. This government has borrowed in one go $1 billion in the last sitting that we had, and we cannot see where it is being utilized. We cannot see the housing projects across Barbados that will take Barbadians, give them reasonable accommodation for purchase or for rental. The government needs to intervene in the housing market in that way to bring back some sort of justice within the housing market in this country, and to give opportunity for the many young people and for the many families out there who are looking for adequate housing. These are things that we need to see happening with the funds from this project, Mr. President. Mr. President, after reviewing all of these outcomes and the fact that there is great concern in this country about whether or not this country would have the capacity in the next 20 years on the trajectory which it is on, being led by the Barbados Labour Party, to actually pay back these loans and to actually earn significant foreign exchange to pay back these loans, we cannot support yet another foreign borrowing by this government. Yes, we would support in terms of the improvements to the healthcare and to the infrastructure. We would say that the money could be raised on the local market, and would suggest that the government explore that option in terms of raising the money on the local market to get these projects done. But we can also say that they have borrowed so much money over the last few years that we have not seen the performance of those loans in this country. And for that reason, Mr. President, we cannot support this loan agreement.
Thank you very much, Senator Worrell. Senator Cummings.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I am going to come back to Senator Worrell in a few moments, but I'm going to start with the specifics of the bill for the benefit of the public and for the benefit of those who may have heard Senator Worrell's intervention. Now, Mr. President, these two orders on the order paper 8 and 9 speak to two very specific loans. They capture, Mr. President, in the first instance, $34.2 million for an urban renewal project in the water, housing, and infrastructure sector, and a second facility, Mr. President, amounting to $58.5 million for a polyclinic upgrade and refurbishment of the primary healthcare system. These are the items captured at orders number 8, and orders are numbered 8 and 9. As said by my colleague, Senator Reid, in his introduction of the bills, they were navigated by the officials at the Ministry with responsibility for Economic Affairs and Investment, the Ministry with responsibility for Finance, the Ministry with responsibility as well for Infrastructure under the Prime Minister's Office, and the Ministry of Health. But it also had the benefit of the input of the central bank, the broader finance team, and the public investment unit. And so while there is a certain ease with which non-technicians may say, well, why not do this and why do this? I have the confidence that the specialist technicians who have expertise and results under their belt, who have actually designed all of our instruments, starting from the calamitous financial situation which the government found itself in by the same Democratic Labour Party that Senator Worrell referred to in 2018, that the government's team that has led this country since then till now is far more competent than anybody on the other side who led us into the scenario that we had to unravel. So I want to start there, Mr. President, with acknowledging that team, as did my colleague, Senator Reid. Now, in the first project, Mr. President, which is the urban renewal project in the water, housing, and infrastructure sector, there are a number of objectives for the project that I want the public to be aware of. One, early this morning when I was reading the newspaper, I saw a former member of the Democratic Labour Party government prior to 2018 making reference to the phrase that many of us know, Barbados is more than an economy, it is also a society. I've already outlined, Mr. President, that the Barbados Labour Party government, with its technical team, skilled and gifted in finance and economic affairs, have unraveled the mess left behind by Senator Worrell's party. But similarly, Mr. President, we are in agreement that we are a society, and it is for that reason that this loan before us is appropriate. This loan, focusing on society and buttressed by a strong economy, focuses on improving and revitalizing housing and neighborhood conditions in low and moderate income communities, specifically in the Bridgetown area. These are densely populated communities in many instances that have not had a renewal project in decades. Who has delivered a renewal project to the city of Bridgetown? The Barbados Labour Party, because it is a society, is delivering a renewal project to the city of Bridgetown. In addition, it is meant to contribute to providing additional affordable housing solutions for persons in that category, low and moderate income families, and, Mr. President, to strengthen the institutional capacity of agencies involved in housing provision and neighborhood revitalization. Now, Mr. President, there are a number of specific things that are meant to be undertaken under the loan, this particular loan, and I want to get into them. The first phase focuses on the development of neighborhoods specifically relating to upgrading the existing low and moderate income communities, providing them with appropriate infrastructure and social facilities in the following areas: Chapman Lane and its suburbs, the areas which lie between President Kennedy Road, Westbury Road, Baxter's Road, Tudor Street, Princess Alice Highway, and the Prescott Boulevard neighborhood. These are divided, Mr. President, into a number of sections. In the first instance, a residential housing development. They're also meant a long-standing issue that has plagued these particular communities in the urban area, in the Bridgetown area, the need for construction to the sewage treatment plant in the Bridgetown area, which they have lived adjacent to and have not been connected to. This Barbados Labour Party government, Mr. President, because we believe in a society and not just talk about it, is under this particular loan arrangement ensuring that those persons once and for all are connected to the sewage plant that they live next door to. We're also, Mr. President, constructing sewage tanks and connecting them to the local sewage system, upgrading the houses and retrofitting them to withstand hurricanes and other climate adaptation solutions. In many instances, Mr. President, from 2018, this government, when we first came to office, spoke about a pit toilet eradication program. In many of these urban areas, there are persons who have benefited because they own the land, and in other instances, they're still navigating outdoor toilets. This project is meant to facilitate the building as well of sanitary facilities, including bathrooms, to those facilities in the Bridgetown area. Installing personal water tanks, including with small pumps and batteries in the event of power outages, in particular after a climate event. There's also meant to be a number of community upgrades, and it includes an area that falls under my remit, extending the natural gas networks and connections in those areas. It will also include things like paving sidewalks, expanding roads, including investments in the sewage system, providing flood protection, renewable energy and energy efficiency initiatives, lighting, street lighting, and water distribution projects. There's also meant to be the resurfacing of deteriorated asphalt roads and improving streets to include pedestrian and emergency vehicle access, as well as waste collection. If you have driven through many of these urban areas in recent times, it is very difficult because these roads are narrow. And we want to make sure that in the event that something goes wrong and you need to have emergency access, whether it is by an ambulance or by a fire truck, that they're able to have access. And so they're making sure that there is provision, especially given in some instances we have seen where there are fires or emergencies that take place in these areas. You hear members of the community raising concern about the inability of emergency vehicles to get into the communities. We want to be able, as a government, to address that. And then, Mr. President, who says that people who live in upscale or middle income housing communities are the only ones who want community recreational facilities? Low and moderate income households also want community recreational facilities, and it is intended under this project that exactly that will happen. There's a resilience agenda, Mr. President, and under the Electricity Supply Act, certainly under my own ministry, a new piece of pioneering legislation which we introduced into this honorable chamber a year ago, there is now a requirement for utility lines, specifically electricity lines, to be underground, so that in the event of a climate disaster, that you are able to recover more quickly than if they were above ground. This project, Mr. President, has included within it a climate resilient component which requires the relocating of water, sewage, and electricity lines from overhead to underground. This is what we call a renewal project for the city of Bridgetown, the communities that live in the Bridgetown area and are deserving of being treated as though they have access to the same kinds of facilities that everyone else does. Now, the second project, Mr. President, under order number 9, is specifically a polyclinic upgrade and the refurbishment of the primary healthcare system. There are a couple of objectives, and I want to focus on what they are. In the first instance, and Senator Worrell spoke about it, a polyclinic upgrade and the refurbishment of the primary healthcare system overall. It is meant, Mr. President, to look at developing healthcare centers, ensuring that we can provide the quality healthcare services that Senator Worrell and average Barbadians are talking about that they deserve. This is very much one of the things that we want to be able to do. Leading in reducing disease, disability, and mortality rates. And so the project is meant to focus on providing citizen access to all of these centers. And how are they meant to do that? By 1, constructing 2 new purpose-built facilities for the provision of primary care services, modernizing and upgrading specific polyclinics, and upgrading point of care and other equipment at about 9 polyclinics. And I want to list what those ones are, Mr. President. In the first instance, the expectation under the project, which has been thoroughly scoped over the last year, is to focus on the construction of 2 new specialized primary care clinics with external parking for both clinics at the Eunice Gibson Polyclinic and the Randall Phillips Polyclinic. For refurbishment, Mr. President, we expect that the following polyclinics, including additional parking spaces, will be refurbished. The Winston Scott Polyclinic, the Maurice Bayer Polyclinic, the St. Philip Polyclinic, Frederick Miller Polyclinic, Edgar Cochrane Polyclinic, Branford Tate Polyclinic, and yes, also the St. John Polyclinic mentioned by Senator Worrell, otherwise known as the David Thompson Health and Social Services Complex. All of those are meant to undergo refurbishments. But they're not stopping there, Mr. President. The clinics are meant to have a number of specialist services made available to them. So there will be general clinics, specialized clinics, maternal and child health clinics, sexual health clinics, support clinics, and emergency clinics for the benefit of the communities that they live. And the intention, Mr. President, is that all of these polyclinics, the 9 for refurbishment and the new ones, so bringing it to 11, will have upgraded, modern, necessary medical equipment and furniture for the facilities to make sure that they're able to function. Now, the project is meant to last for a period of 4 years, and the loan makes provision for an additional year of closeout. This is in terms of the execution of the project. The loan itself will be repayable over a period of 20 years on principal and interest, with a grace period of 5 years. The interest will be that 3.5%, yes, per annum. And both loans, as has been done in every single instrument that Barbados has undertaken since 2018, will include the well talked about natural disaster clauses that allow for us to pause in the event of. Now, I want to come back to Senator Worrell's comments on whether or not the government is borrowing too much, what it is using it for. I've already made it very clear that the services that the public of Barbados may say on the ground to all of us, not just the Democratic Labour Party leader, the opposition here in the Honourable Chamber, but they say to all of us, the services that people say that they need, they hold one body accountable, this government. We are held accountable for delivering on those services. Whether those services are provided by way of the government servicing debt over time and being able, people are looking for delivery. But I want to get into that. And I want to make the following statement. Our international borrowing is strategic. It is not excessive. And I want to say why. Here is why. I want to say why the computer is picking up the call. That is, my phone is silent, but the computer is showing it. We were in this chamber, Mr. President, a few weeks back, and we did had a fiscal bill that we were navigating. In June of 2025, I believe it was the issuance of $500 million. Now, this was carefully timed to allow us to return to the international capital markets. At that time, we spoke about the last time we went to the capital markets, which was in 2006, 2007, somewhere thereabouts. And now we have seen Barbados' successful 2018 debt restructuring. And I probably may get to 4 times with repetition myself, but the disastrous 10 years of financial and economic management of the Democratic Labour Party, which was undertaken by the Barbados Labour Party when we came to government in 2018, had to be restructured, and it was done successfully. If there is a doubt in anyone's mind about that, go back to the numbers. The same central bank reports will show that. So after we successfully looked at debt restructuring and have had years of sound fiscal management, we went back to the international markets in June 2025. This issuance, we have said here in this chamber, replaced what would have been an instrument under the Eurobond that would have matured in 2029. We undertook, Mr. President, to begin to prepay that loan, and we smoothed our debt profile. And we created over $300 million in fiscal space through the year 2030. In addition, unlike the previous instrument, this one also carried the contingent clauses that I just spoke about, allowing for deferrals in the event of natural disasters or pandemics. This is a resilience measure. And so, yes, we undertook that. The government, however, is balancing how it goes to the market domestically and locally. But to say that there is no domestic finance raising is also a misrepresentation. Over $200 million in new BOSS bonds, Mr. President, have been issued. BOSS bonds plus have been issued. A further $100 million domestic bond was launched in 2025. And as at the end of June 2025, Mr. President, we had also a number of investments, including in Treasury bills, and we can see the BOSS Plus bonds bringing in around $27.7 million, mainly from domestic institutional investors, Mr. President, and not only the institutional investors, Mr. President, but householders are seen to remain the primary holders of these bonds. This is a testimony to the fact that there is robust confidence and robust participation in the domestic markets, despite what is being offered by the others on the other side. There is not an automatic move to only borrow on the international market, Mr. President. The intention of the fiscal managers is to ensure that our borrowing profile is designed to diversify our funding sources, to reduce our refinancing risk, and to extend our maturity profiles. It's not really meant to focus on one source over another. And so, Mr. President, despite all that we have heard from the other side, the reality of it is that despite all of their loud soundings about Barbados' debt, the debt to GDP ratio has fallen from where it was when they left office to just 102% to GDP, and our interest to revenue ratio has declined to 12.7%. And both of these have been found by our international partners to be indicators of a healthy debt profile. So, Mr. President, I want to address those things very quickly. I want to also ensure that we have a balance of why the government is doing both international and domestic borrowing. I want to make it clear that based on our international partners, our economy is doing well. Based on this loan, our society is also being positioned to thrive. And the final thing that I want to make clear in my contribution, Mr. President, is also the diversification of Barbados' bilateral and diplomatic relationships. Now, the Democratic Labour Party would wish to reduce the conversation to the Prime Minister going overseas and so on. But when did we see in any previous incarnation the range of international partners who are participating in Barbados in grant, in development, in technical assistance, and yes, in loans with a 3.5% interest rate. The Saudi Development Fund, and I remember quite well the first time the head of the Saudi Development Fund came to Barbados, and it was at the time, Mr. President, I remember it well because I went to Jamaica at the time with responsibility for tourism to have engagements with them. And so with the government of Saudi Arabia, they then came to Barbados subsequently, and they have maintained through the Minister of Finance of Saudi Arabia a strong relationship diplomatically with Barbados, and now a technical and a financial relationship with Barbados. And it is because they and others have seen these numbers, Mr. President. Barbados's external position improved in the first half of 2025. It was supported by a number of things, including, and I quote, because this is the press release that was issued by the Central Bank of Barbados on the recently issued report. So the press release contained the following information. So whether it is our international bond partners, whether it is the World Bank, whether it is the international financial institutions, whether it is the ratings agencies, Mr. President, they are seeing these indicators. And in the report, Mr. President, it says this: tourism and the non-traded sector drove growth in the first half of the year. Output in the traded sector rose by 3.9%, as seen in gains in tourism and agriculture. I want to get into the specifics here, Mr. President. Tourism expanded in the first half of the year, boosted by strong demand by the United States. Long-stay arrivals increased by 3.3% in the first half of 2025. That was supported by additional airlift and targeted marketing across the source markets. Arrivals from the United States rose by 9.8%, contributing more than 90% of the overall increase. Stronger visitor demand, Mr. President, lifted occupancy. I'm quoting from the press release, Mr. President, issued by the Central Bank. Stronger visitor demand lifted occupancy across both hotels and the sharing economy, and during the first 6 months of the year, all of them saw increases. It also went on, Mr. President, to say cruise arrivals surged to a new high during the first 6 months of 2025. In transit cruise passengers, the details are there, Mr. President, that is there. I brought to this chamber, Mr. President, the Foreign Currency Permits Bill, which spoke about the growth of the global business sector. And in the press release, the Central Bank says this: foreign currency permit issuances rose slightly as new entities responded favorably to the revised foreign currency permits legislation. Authorities issued 1,227 foreign currency permits between the period under account, an increase of just under 1% compared to the same period in 2024. Now, I could go on, but to suggest, Mr. President, that tourism is in decline is not factual. To suggest that other productive sectors are also not performing is also not factual. And then, Mr. President, on the labor economy, the report says this: the unemployment rate dropped to a record low during the first quarter of 2025. And I say a record low, Mr. President. At the end of March, the rate stood at 6.3%, down from 6.9% in the first quarter of 2024. A fall in persons, and it goes on to here, jobless speak, but it says the labor force expanded by 3,600 persons as fewer persons retired compared to the previous year. Mr. President, the resolution is before us. There are two resolutions, one on infrastructure in the Bridgetown and the urban areas, one on public health upgrades. I have spoken, Mr. President, on the performance of the society. I've spoken, Mr. President, on the performance of the economy, as people are asking for as well, and I've spoken on our debt profile. And I beg to move, Mr. President, that at this point, this resolution has a favorable consideration of our colleagues. My colleague will wrap up, and I know others will speak, but I support this resolution, and I am obliged to you.
Thank you, Senator Cummings. Senator Reverend Canon Dr. Rogers.
Thank you very much for recognizing me, Mr. President. I join my other colleagues in, she isn't in her chair right now, welcoming Senator Trim to the chamber. And as I've said before, sir, I have great confidence in the young people of Barbados. We have an education system that has nurtured them well, and I'm certainly looking forward to the presentations that will be given by Senator Trim in this chamber. Sir, I came to this island in 1987, that's almost 40 years ago, and I've always felt, as I've mentioned in here before, that Barbados is one of the best societies in the world. I felt that we've had governments over the years, both administrations, some more successful than others, that have looked out for the betterment of the people and the development of this country. We have a very high standard of living, comparable to others in the region. And as a result of that, there'll be a necessity to borrow. I've heard of all kinds of loans from the time I've been on this island. When it wasn't a bullet loan, it was something else, and everybody keeps noise about every loan that is made. But if we want to maintain the standard of living that we have, we understand that we have to borrow. And these resolutions before us reflect that tradition. The reason for the sums of money being borrowed are noble: to upgrade our polyclinic system, to maintain a high level of primary health care in our society, and also to upgrade our urban renewal projects, housing, water, infrastructure. These are all noble things and necessary things, sir, and for that reason I have no problem supporting these resolutions that are before us. My question would come on the other side, and I ask your permission, sir, to go a bit down the social line, as I always go from time to time. While I recognize the importance of these loans, and I support the necessity of these loans to maintain the standard of living that we have and the standard of health care that we want to see in our country. As you heard from Senator Reid, it takes $5 billion to run the Barbados economy. I mean, we cannot generate all of that in 1 year through our productivity here. And so we need to borrow, trusting that the investment that we've made in our people and in our young people will then accrue to our benefit in years to come. And it is within that context, sir, that I want us to reflect upon these two resolutions that are before us, because my question would be, and as I support the resolutions, but my question, just to raise the question, who will repay these loans? Who will repay these loans? I had jotted on my piece of paper here, Barbados is more than an economy, it's a society. Seems as though somebody had a sneak peek at my paper. But those are words that were uttered by a former prime minister, the late David Thompson. And he was really raising the question to which Senator Cummins has responded, that because it's a society, we do these things and so on. But I want to look at it from another perspective today. We recognize it's a society, and we recognize the need to procure these loans for the benefit and the building up of our society. But what if we are procuring the loans in one place, but the society is falling apart in another? And that's why I raised the question, who will repay these loans? I believe we're in the crop over season, so it was, I'm not referencing tech charge, I'm not referencing. In 1986, the Calypsonian, the red plastic bag, Stetson Wilshire, he didn't enter the competition that year, but he sang a very interesting song, "We Must Rebuild." We may have the biggest bank or the fanciest highway, but what if the people are getting worse every day? Yes, you know, you see. Senator Nichols sings in the cathedral choir, sir, and he's quoting some things. And we have to look at these resolutions within that context now, because in recent years, and I may sound like a stuck record on this, sir, but I believe it is worth repeating. anecdotally, an old priest once saw a younger one in the vestry looking at some old papers. And the young priest was a little ashamed and said, "Sir, I'm dusting off an old one here." And the old priest said to him, "Son, the gospel has been around for over 2,000 years and we're still using it. So if your sermon is relevant, it is relevant." And I believe that this particular angle that I want to speak about is relevant to these two resolutions when I ask who will repay these bills. Because one of the challenges that we're having in our society now, and in recent times, public figures have been referencing it, is the use of marijuana by our people. It is too prevalent in our society. And you know my angle on this, sir. I did not oppose the medicinal cannabis bill or the Sacramento bill when they came, but there was something that I begged us to do, and I'm still begging the government to pay attention to it. We have not set a threshold for the potency of cannabis on our streets. And that is where the danger comes. It is not about 14 grams or anything. It is about the potency of THC. In April of this year, our acting director of public prosecutions at the time, Alliston Seal, SC, made a link that the rising violence in our community is linked to marijuana use. That was his theory. He said, of the 1% of pre-sentence reports returned to my office, only 1% of them involved offenders who had never used cannabis. That means 99% of them are for people who have used cannabis. Likewise, only recently, I can't remember her name, the medical doctor from the QEH raised concerns about the exposure of unborn children to marijuana and the exposure of young children to marijuana. Our National Council on Substance Abuse has recently raised concerns about new psychoactive substances in Barbados, referencing synthetic cannabis. Now, and this is where it becomes technical, sir, and why I keep raising this. I have been very comfortable living under every administration in Barbados under which I've lived, because they are bright people whom the populace have elected, and they have technocrats alongside them who I believe do the best they can to lead this country. And we've heard this morning of the prowess of this particular administration, its capabilities and its competencies. And I agree with all of that. And what I want to appeal to, sir, these competent people, please set a threshold for the potency of THC on our streets. If we do not do that, all these loans that we are procuring now to build up our country, you're going to have a people who are not productive enough to repay them. What do I mean by this, sir? Who knows if there's Godfather OG on the streets of Barbados? There we go. Godfather OG is the strongest synthetic hybrid of cannabis there's been in terms of THC. It contains 34% THC. The legal limit that the US federal government has set for THC is 0.3. Do we have 34% on our streets? We do not know. Because granted, it is not supposed to come through our ports, but if it gets in, nobody regulates it. Because people have the ability to walk around with 14 grams of God knows what. Nobody knows what they're smoking. not even the one smoking it. And so we need to set and crack down on this problem before we have an opioid crisis. Because as much as I support this development, we have to look at the society in general and ask ourselves, are we building up in one place and destroying in another? Just by negligence, just by our refusal to do something that can put a cap on what is on our streets. Because if there are people out there that have access to things that are as many as 100 times percent what is considered a safe limit, what are we doing to our children? What are we doing to our people? And so I want to encourage us, I appeal. I am no technocrat. I just did a little reading on this. But talk to the people who know and ask them if it is not worthwhile to set a limit of the percentage of THC of cannabis that is on our streets. We look at the US. At the federal level, it is 0.3. That is why the CEO of the medicinal cannabis industry came out again in recent days talking about banks not listening, but banks are not going to listen to you. But the banks told you since 2019 what the problem was. It's right there in the legislation. It's right there in the Joint Select Committee's reports. So we have to make a decision as a country about what we're going to do with the young people that are in our care. I know some will say, but look at alcohol. Alcohol has a legal limit, you know. They recognized that a long time ago. There's a toxicity level for alcohol, and they set it. We normally, the guy, well, you wouldn't know, sir. I grew up in St. Kitts, and on a nice, clear day, you could see a little smoke coming from the mountains. And once you see smoke coming from the bush in the mountains, somebody was up there stilling something. The boys were stilling their Hammond, what you call moonshine. That's illegal. It was illegal. And we still have that here, that moonshine is illegal. And so the alcohol thresholds are set in the number of glasses of X, Y, or Z at this percentage and so on. What is the limit for THC in Barbados? We don't know. I don't want to say we don't care because I know that this government is a caring one. I know, sir. I know that the legislation came because you were treating, and the NCSA said, what we're dealing with is not criminal, it's about rehab. And I agree, I understand that. But I still believe we need to set a limit of the potency of cannabis on our streets. If we fail to do that, everybody will be walking around smoking their 14 grams and nobody touching them. But 14 grams of what? The police told me the other day, and this is anecdotal, sir, that fella's mixing in rat poison and all kinds of things now. And mixing up all kinds of things out there, but they can smoke 14 grams of something. 14 grams of what? And depending on the potency, if you smoke 14 grams for breakfast, and then you go and you have a mid-morning brunch of 14 grams, and then some for lunch, and a mid-afternoon snack, and then later in the evening you get a piece to cool down your head. Well, you fried your brains the whole day with God knows what. And those are the people that we're dependent on to pay back this 117 million and 168.4 million. And so I appeal to us, and I say us here as a parliament, let's sit down. Let's sit down and recognize that we may have a crisis emerging on our hands. And all these great things we're doing, building out our health industry, building up our infrastructure and all those things will mean nothing if we do not fix the other side. If we do not make sure that our children are growing up in a healthy and safe environment, that they do not have access to things that will destroy them. If we fail to do that, we would have betrayed everything our foreparents worked for. We'd have betrayed the developmental pattern that has made Barbados one of the greatest nations on the world. Because we'd have set up a society where the next generation will have no capability or capacity to maintain what we've set in place. And so I appeal to us, sir, all of us, to let us sit down, revisit, and ask ourselves, what will be the threshold for cannabis on our island? Not how many grams you can carry, but the potency that people have access to. Because that is where the danger really lies, is the potency. We look at California and all those places, but California cannot trade outside its borders. Can't move a piece outside of California because it is illegal at the federal level. And you have one of the most conservative governments leading the US right now, and I put conservative in inverted commas. That farm bill that was supposed to be renegotiated since 2018, nobody's touching that. They're not going to raise that THC level above 0.3. And so we have to determine what we're going to do here on all 166 square miles to protect our next generation. Because everybody who believes that there's somebody smoking something, but nobody knows what they're smoking. Nobody knows the potency level. They're not aware of these things. And because it says it's cannabis, they smoke it. But we're destroying ourselves. We're destroying our community. And so I want us all to sit down and look at the level of THC that we will consider legal in this country and crack down on anything out there that is above that level for the sake of our children and for the sake of our community, our society that we're building, for the economy that we're strengthening, for the infrastructure that we're building out. We must rebuild, but we must rebuild looking at the generation and what we have put in front of them and said, it is okay. And so, sir, as I said, I have no problem supporting these resolutions because these are about national development. This is what Barbados has always done. We've always sought to go one better than we were before to make sure that our people have the highest standard of living possible, the availability to the best health care possible. That's what these are about, and that's good. But let's look at the other side and ask the question, who will repay these bills? And how are we nurturing them to have the ability, not only the academic and expertise, but also the mental capacity and the productivity to repay these bills. And so with those few words, I thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Reverend Canon Dr. Rogers. Okay. Senator Reverend Morris.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to lend my support to this resolution before us. I just listened to Senator Rogers and I listened to the earmuffs type of prophecy that was pronounced here. And I prefer, sir, to take the root note of the prophet Hosea and bring a little hope, or to indicate that there's still some hope for this country. And I do so, sir, because I want to not only support this resolution, but also to say that it is my distinct privilege and profound joy to stand here today to celebrate and welcome and congratulate what I regard as a moment of history in the making. And I have to speak this way, sir. because I'm just trying to project some hope. But a moment of history in the making, and that is the entrance of an extraordinary young lady into the distinguished chamber of our Honorable Senate. Part of that history, sir, is that a young lady sits beside her former teacher in this parliament. And if that is not history, sir, well then, you will certainly not find a situation where a teacher is flanked by two of his former students in the parliament of this country. Sir, sir, the interest of Senator Trim is not merely to mark a political milestone, but to acknowledge a journey shaped by integrity, tenacity, and the commitment to public service. Today, I'm speaking because I taught her. Today, we welcome not just a new senator, but a new voice, one that carries with it the hopes of a generation, the wisdom of diligent preparation, and the spark of transformative leadership. I stand to welcome her, sir, because I believe that this is a moment for which she was prepared. I encountered her at the University of Waterford. I know you may caution me to say that there's no such institution in Barbados, but I want to say, sir, that that institution at Waterford is the foundation on which the educational ideals of this country were lodged, and it happened almost throughout St. Michael, sir. But I immediately recognized her talent, her leadership skill, which in my view excelled those of her contemporaries, her concern for the welfare of others, of other students, which made her the go-to girl when things seemed problematic for members of the student body. Yes, sir, there's hope. At school, she was intelligent, industrious, and a young lady in whom the most implicit confidence could be placed. For me, it was an honor to have her as my student. I believe, sir, that in an age where cynicism is too often overshadows idealism, her story reminds us of the power of conviction. She has broken barriers as I've observed her from 11 years old. And I believe, sir, that she could be a leading example for other young persons in this country. Not to follow just sir, those of whom Senator Waters just mentioned, but I know that she walks circumspectly. And as she takes her seat in this Senate, I know that she will inspire those and represent those who today, and speak for those who will not be here. Sir, let me briefly respond to some things that we heard this morning. When I enter a debate, I do not enter that debate to win an argument. I enter that debate to get to the truth. And it's time that some of the things that are said must be examined with forensic exactitude. I've heard about the amount of borrowing and nothing to show for it. And that is not true, sir. I recall the sewers on the streets clean. I recall the buses. I recall the garbage trucks. I recall the road repairs. I recall a number of things that have happened with all the money that we have borrowed. So would you believe, I read something from Jamaica this week. Would you believe that Jamaica has just acquired new buses, sir? But you know what those buses are? Used buses from the United States, used school buses from the United States. The buses that we have are new electric buses brought to Barbados and bought by some of the money that we are given account for today. Sir, there's no doubt now that Barbados owns the largest fleet of electric buses in the Caribbean. But these are not said. We are told about all the economy and how things are bad. Yet the experts in their analyses are saying quite opposite from what we are hearing from the opposition. In addition, sir, we are told that we had the alternative means of borrowing. But where were those alternative means of borrowing between 2013 and 2018? We should borrow on the local market. What do you mean borrow in the local market? So you mean borrow from the National Insurance Scheme, as was done, and it is in trouble? Sir, it is, I think it is time that we speak to our issues frankly, fairly, and truthfully. But to give the impression that Barbados is doing so badly now, but was doing so good under the 10 glorious years, sir, is not something that I would want to pass on to future generations. I agree with Senator Rogers. We have to look at the social impact of what is going on in our society. I know there's a view that we must have that the country is more than an economy, it is also a society. But we can have all the society that we want. But if we don't have the money to run that society, we will still be in trouble. I agree that we have to look at those who may pay. But like any institution, sir, I'm sure Senator Rogers will tell you that even if you go into an institution where you, and the problem is here in Barbados in terms of the question was asked, who is going to redeem the pension scheme, the pension scheme? Yes, we have these questions. We do have these questions. But I have hope. I have hope in this country. Because when I see people like Senator Trim enter these precincts to represent the voices of many in this country, I have hope that someday the God that I used to serve will turn things around. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Reverend Rogers. Senator Mr. Millard.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I would first like to welcome Senator Trim. I haven't listened to Senator Morris's glowing tributes. I only wish to say to Senator Trim, you must always remember that he or she who appoints you can remove you, but that should not stop you from speaking to the truth. Sir, I am pleased that as I prepare to exit medicine, the government has seen it fit. I congratulate the government for this, to invest some serious money in the polyclinics and our primary health care. There have been voices who have called for this for a long, long time. And hopefully when the government invests the money up front, we will see the results at the back end. The issues that are related to chronic, non-communicable diseases and the general access to health care for those who choose or who cannot afford to have private care needed to be looked at, and the government appears, I've not heard all the details, the government appears to be making a serious effort by investing money in it. But at the end of the day, sir, the only thing that matters in healthcare, sir, it's not the money, it's the outcomes. So if you spend $58 million and nothing improves, you have wasted it. So we need to be able to come back to the people within a set time period and advise the people of what improvements we have seen in their health, sir, having spent $58 million in a 4-year period. Sir, there's no question that there needs to be, no one so far has mentioned it, the linkages electronically of the polyclinics as a network, GP's offices, and the hospital, QEH, and other hospitals. And I hope that when all has been said, the new electronic medical record that, when it's launched, will include all the polyclinics, and persons' information can be available real time, and it will improve the swiftness and the quality of healthcare. But sir, there is no point having an efficient system in the polyclinic and you get to the QEH and it's a wall. And I have to say again, I hope that I can look across there in that empty chair and see my minister, but I don't see him. Sir, there's been a constant noise about the state of healthcare in this country. There've been complaints, there've been some explanations, some excuses, but at the end of the day, unless the people are getting what they are paying for, unless they're getting what they're paying for, they are being robbed. If I pay for something, I should get it. And if you levy a specific tax on me for something, I should have received it when I request it. So, when I, as a surgeon, cannot operate on elective patients for 4 weeks, I have a problem. I have a problem when within my hospital, there is so much critical care traffic that it spills into the recovery room and we cannot operate and no one says anything about it to the public. I should not have to come to this parliament, sir, to say that. The area should have been bombarding you with explanations as to why it is happening. But it's not been happening. There seems to be a blackout. But we have a communication specialist in the institution. But there's no communication unless I am deaf to it. Sir, we can spend all of the money we wish, but unless the people for whom the services are being built out are aware of them and can access them in a timely fashion, it will make no difference to their lives. And education outside of town hall meetings is critical, sir. We have not been able to keep those who do not have a voice, except on brass tacks, happy with what they're receiving. We have nice coverage in the paper about what new private facilities are opened, and lots of people attend and speak of the future, but we cannot seem to get the services that people are paying for up and running. And I'm not going to comment, sir, on oncology services, because my minister isn't here. I'm not going to comment on it. Sir, we have a brain drain. So when the government spends $58 million in infrastructure and puts in place all of the nice point-of-care machines that I heard mentioned, and an electronic medical record, who is going to run it? What are we doing about our nursing training? Are we having adequate numbers of nurses who are willing to stay and live in Barbados? Will we have to send out recruiters every year to find nurses to replace those who leave? What can we do to make the nurses happier? What can we do to improve their lot in life? Do they have to go to the United States or the UK or further afield to make a good living as professionals? And similarly for the doctors. Do our doctors want to stay? Or do they want to work in the public sector? You might stay in Barbados, but you might not work in the public sector. Sir, if we do not address some of these issues, the song by Bob Marley, and it says it was Exodus, movement of Jah people, but they're leaving. They were going back, but this time they're leaving, sir. Every year, the recruiters come, and nurses leave. And almost every year, we are faced with nursing shortages. And there has to be some fundamental reason why it's happening. And the people who come and work hard and give fantastic service, they don't migrate to Barbados. They're transient. They come, do their time, and they leave. And when our population, sir, increases and expands as we need to, what will we have? Will we only have care in the private sector? And I hope that there has been a comprehensive look at what manpower needs or what manpower requirements we will need when we spend large sums of money, and what difference it will make, sir, and whether some of the things that we currently do manually can be automated and have reduced need for human input. There's no question, sir, that a part of medicine has moved to the screen, and you can get Zoom consults or remote consults, but at the end of the day, people still need to be seen. And they need to know that when they are seen in the primary care setting, and you have a condition that needs to be treated in a tertiary care institution, then you can access one in a timely fashion. There's no point going to a polyclinic, having your consultation last half an hour. You have to go to someplace else, and it takes you 3 days to move from the point where you arrive till we get into bed. I hope that as I age, sir, and as I will inevitably need the services of my colleagues, unless there's some magical pill that we will get, that some of the issues that I came in and found as I age and reach the end of my career, I will not be leaving them behind, and all we would have done is spent money. Sir, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Miller. If there are no other speakers, please welcome Senator Reid.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to wrap up, but I do wish to acknowledge my colleagues and their contributions. Obviously, there was a lot of effusive praise and welcome for our new colleague, and I'm looking forward to her contributions when they come. Mr. President, I want to reference the point made by Senator Maynard, and this, in my wrap-up, is really around the idea of a magical pill. And to underscore the initial framing that I did, and that the process of running the economy is not there's no magical pills involved. It's graft, it's work, it's effort. And I wasn't certain some of the reference points made in the central bank report, but it's available online for many to see. And some of the things involved in it that were mentioned were quite contrary to what the report says. And the story is very clear, that you move from a nearly 180% GDP to debt ratio to just over 100%, despite having structural reform twice and a global pandemic. You've halved the amount of interest payments you make compared to your government revenue in a period of 7 years. You've returned such levels of confidence in your economy that you are able to raise in a way that you simply weren't able to raise before. You've gone out the process of reducing the amount of imbalance that you have in the economy. You have tripled the amount of capex you spend on fiscal expenditure on capital projects. Your construction is booming, your tourism is doing well. You are not in nirvana, but you're doing solidly. And there is an ambition to do much, much more. To Senator Rogers' point, you are in the middle of deep thought around social innovation, social uplift in a moment of difficulty that we could all acknowledge. But you are a good country looking to do better. And I think that's a fundamental point. So while we may try to score political points and go all over the place, to my colleague, Senator Morris's point, the truth will always be the truth and the work will always be the work. And so I beg, Mr. President, for this resolution to now pass. I'm in your hands.
The question is that order number 8, this resolution to approve in accordance with the provisions of the Special Loans Act, Chapter 105, the borrowing of approximately 117 million from the Saudi Fund for Development, in this case, polyclinic upgrade, refurbishment of primary healthcare system, phase 1. This resolution will not pass. All those honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. The names, the ayes have it. This resolution is now passed.
Mr. President, order number 9, in the name of the Honorable Minister of Innovation, Industry, Science and Technology, to move the passing of a resolution to approve in accordance with the provisions of the Special Loans Act, Cap 105, the borrowing by the Government of Barbados of the sum of approximately 68.4 million Barbados dollars from the Saudi Fund for Development on the terms and conditions contained in the loan agreement, the main provisions of which are set out in the schedule, and the proceeds of which will be used to finance the urban renewal project in the water, housing, and infrastructure sectors, phase 1.
Senator Reid.
Mr. President, I rise to beg that order number 9 now be passed as a resolution.
The question is that order number 9, resolution to approve in accordance with the provisions of the Special Loans Act, Chapter 105, the borrowing of some $68.4 million from the Saudi Fund for Development. In this particular order is in relation to financing an urban renewal project in water, housing, and infrastructure sectors. So the question is that this resolution will not pass. Will those honorable senators in favor please say aye? Aye. Those against please say no. The things the ayes have it, this resolution is now passed. Senator Dr. Chantal Monroe-Knight.
Mr. President, I beg to move that the sitting be now suspended for lunch until 3 p.m.
The question is that this sitting of Honorable the Senate be suspended until 3 p.m. Sorry? will just be Senator Mulroney.
Thank you, Mr. President. Noting that we will have some committee meetings over the luncheon period, I beg to move that this sit-in be suspended until 3:15.
The question is that this sitting of the Senate be suspended until 3:15 p.m. today. Will those honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. The members of Committee of Selection are reminded of a meeting during the luncheon period today. Sitting is now suspended until 3:15 p.m. today.